Flesh and Blood is a hero-centric fantasy card game designed for constructed, booster draft, and sealed deck play by gaming industry veterans. The name, Flesh and Blood, is part of the philosophy of the game's designers, who grew tired of the push to a digital grind and wanted instead to create a game that was intended to be played in person, to be played in flesh and blood. I've done a few videos about Flesh and Blood, including how to play and a review of their budget pre-constructed blitz decks. And while my channel is first and foremost a Magic the Gathering one, I love gaming, and have sometimes done video content on everything from Legends of Runeterra to The Binding of Isaac, to Firefly, the game, and Star Trek Catan. Really, Star Trek Catan? Star Trek Catan, and even games like Keyforge. But never have I seen such an undercurrent of skepticism and distrust as I have with Flesh and Blood. In this video, I want to offer my unrestricted analysis and unfiltered thoughts on the game. Is Flesh and Blood just some kind of collector's scam? Is it a fad, a bubble? How ridiculous are its prices, and how expensive is its model? All that and more as I dive into the truth about Flesh and Blood. To begin, I have zero stake in Flesh and Blood as a collector, and honestly, even as a content creator. I learned how to play because viewers requested I do a tutorial on it, and I did so, and I found the game to be a lot of fun, and met some locals that I kept playing with. Thus far, I've done a total of 2.5 videos on it. I mean, I've covered Keyforge more than I have Flesh and Blood. And yet, overwhelmingly, I hear these concerns about the game, and as a critic and commentator, I have strong opinions on a lot of what is being said. As always, these are my opinions, but I will try and offer evidence to support my inferences and conclusions. I ask only that you listen and then decide for yourselves. Like I always say, it is your evaluation that matters most. The three major topics I will be covering are the game itself, concerns that collectors are controlling or otherwise driving artificial values within the game, and larger concerns that Flesh and Blood, like so many that have come before it, is a fad, a bubble, and will go the way of artifact hex and, well, Keyforge. I'm sorry, Keyforge. I love you, but I want to begin with the claims that Flesh and Blood is somehow not an actual game, or that it is not a very good one. Well, of course, everyone has their own jam, their own likes and dislikes. I find these sentiments really puzzling because, well, I've played Flesh and Blood. I did a tutorial on it. I continue to play it, and it's a real game. In addition to being able to teach you how to play, I can describe what type of a game it is. I'd call Flesh and Blood a deck-building trading card game that is reminiscent in many ways of Vanguard, but with its own unique style and features. I can describe what I see as the strengths and weaknesses of its gameplay. Though obviously this is more subjective, I would say both are the complexity of play, as Flesh and Blood is a game with dozens of different things you always need to be paying attention to. In this sense, it reminds me of the point in a Commander game when you and your opponents each have a giant board state. You have to be aware of a lot of different things at once. To me, Flesh and Blood is something those big, thinky Magic players will love, but it can also at times be overwhelming, and as someone who just likes to rock mono red burn or jam some Ticket to Ride, I'm not always in the mood for piloting blue-white control or spending the evening playing Seven Wonders, if that helps put it in context for you. But it is a real game, and many people, not as a sham or a scam, many people legitimately think it is fun to play. My kid plays it and loves it. I was down at my local game store, and a couple of the guys working behind the register, Magic players, expressed interest in Flesh and Blood, and so I bought them a few handfuls of booster packs, and weeks later I found out that they both had built decks and were playing regularly, absolutely loving the game. That is what I consider to be a very telling and genuine reaction. That's something that helped convince me early on, not only of the legitimacy of Flesh and Blood, but that there was something special about it. And the last time I rolled into that shop, different employees asked me if I wanted a game. Turns out they all started a Flesh and Blood employee league. That is a real gaming moment right there, and it has nothing to do with collectors or high-priced packs. Never mind the growing host of former Magic the Gathering pros and grinders who have been migrating to the game as its own competitive circuit gears up. These are experienced and hardcore Magic players, and if they are not tweeting out harsh criticisms of the game strictly in terms of its qualities as a game, then I think that too is telling. I know for a fact that Magic the Gathering players and Magic the Gathering pros especially will flat out tell you when something isn't working. You know me, that I'll say what's on my mind. Well, the gameplay is solid. It's a great game, but what about the next concern? Cost. Cost as it relates to access is something I care very deeply about. I do have some issues and concerns with Flesh and Blood, but seldom are those concerns reflected in the comments I hear about the game. What I hear is that booster packs aren't available, or they cost a fortune. Decks cost thousands of dollars. Sometimes even individual cards cost thousands of dollars. And even accusations that the entire thing is some sort of pyramid scheme engineered by a secret cabal of collectors with Rudy of Alpha Investments, the secret shadowy kingpin at the top. All of that absolutely and demonstrably false. When Flesh and Blood first came out, there were indeed supply issues relating both to shipping and distribution problems that were exacerbated as the world plunged into a global pandemic, as well as caused by the overwhelming surge of interest in the game. This created an initial impression of scarce product and permanently inflated prices. What people need to realize is that simply is not reflective of the current state of the game. First of all, as far as product is concerned, I can literally show you it for sale. Every single edition of Flesh and Blood for about or under $100 a box. People point to the first edition printings of these boxes being worth several hundred or even thousands of dollars, and I feel that is really disingenuous, because these people are claiming, oh yeah, you can't buy a booster box for less than $100, and yes, you can. Any of them. You just buy the unlimited run, not the first edition. What's the difference? Unlimited means that they are printing it, well, unlimited. They are still printing and producing the set. The first printing is the limited one. This is the period where packs are perhaps hard to get, supply is finite, and yeah, you do see crazy prices. And I get it. I get the anger and frustration and feelings of missing out that come with not being able to afford or sometimes even find these packs. But that is what the unlimited printing is for. Unlimited printings of all Flesh and Blood sets means all Flesh and Blood sets, even the first, are still available at reasonable prices. While these sets do not have the same special treatments in them that the first printings did, they still have all the game pieces and their own versions of rare and special treatment cards. In all honesty, the best way I could describe it is this. Imagine when a new Magic the Gathering set comes out that the first printing of it is in black border and that it has ultra rare full art versions of cards in foil in addition to the foils you can normally get. But then imagine that after that first printing, Wizards of the Coast kept printing the set, printing it continuously to more or less ensure that even years later, packs would still be available at $4 each, or $100 per pack. And the only difference is that all of these unlimited printings were now white border. So the only way you could get black border cards was to buy the first edition printings, and then after that, you're dealing with white border cards, and also missing out on those extra special rare treatment cards. In other words, would you love it if you could go down to your local game store and buy original Innistrad, Urza's Saga, Shards of Alara, heck, revised and 4th edition booster packs, and have those booster packs all be about $4 each still, only for those sets they'd be white border? Well, that's kind of what Flesh and Blood is aiming to do, and has done, and again, this is demonstrable. But then imagine that, after that first printing, Wizards of the Coast kept printing the set, printing it continuously to more or less ensure that even years later, packs would still be available at about $4 each or $100 per box. And the only difference is that all of these unlimited printings were white border cards and also missing those extra special rare treatment cards. If nothing else, these claims that you simply can't find Flesh and Blood booster packs for reasonable prices are absolutely bogus. Again, I can literally show you the packs and boxes for sale at reasonable prices. It's the unlimited printings, but yes, they are available. Go down to your local game store. They are there too, along with $10 to $15 pre-constructed Blitz decks. That's all you need to get started playing. Worry about securing that $250 Feandril's Spring Tunic when you're ready to sit down competitively at GP Vegas. I mean, the Calling Vegas. TC? Yeah, TC Vegas. I'll be there. I am booked for Vegas this September, but no, I actually don't have a Feandril's Spring Tunic in my deck, and it's one of the areas that I do think there is fair criticism in, so let's talk about that. For the most part, Flesh and Blood focuses on having a wide array of special treatments, from rainbow foils to cold foils to special art and sometimes borders, resulting in some game pieces having extremely pricey versions of themselves. For example, Twinning Blade is about a $20 card, but oh, whoa, there's this rainbow foil version of it, only available in those first edition boxes, and that'll apparently cost you, wow, $1,400. And this is, again, where I feel disingenuous criticism is often lobbed, as I see people saying, oh, want to play with Twinning Blade? That'll cost you over $1,000. No, it will cost you $20, which, while not cheap, is a vast difference. And again, this is people obsessively looking at the first edition boxes and not unlimited ones. There are, of course, some cards whose cheapest version are quite high, and I feel the best example of this is Feandril's Spring Tunic. This is a game piece whose cheapest version will run you $150 if you aren't lucky to crack this in a pack. Yes, you can absolutely crack this in an unlimited pack. I'm very glad of that, but it is exceptionally rare, and in the case of Spring Tunic, it's a card that a lot of people feel is a must-run in most decks. Now, this is arguably not as critical to your Flesh and Blood deck as lands are to your Magic deck, and unlike Magic cards that you need 3 to 4 copies of in Flesh and Blood, you can only even run 1 copy of Spring Tunic because it's an equipment, so it's still cheaper than a playset of Scalding Tarns, even now. Also, as an equipment, it's really easy to transfer between decks because it never actually goes in your deck. It's an equipment. You really, honestly, only ever need 1 Spring Tunic for life, and technically, you don't even really need it unless you're trying to win the main event at TC Vegas. But the fact that this is a universal card that can go in every deck and is so good that you'd want to run it in every deck is something I am not a huge fan of. I disagree with that. And while I don't think it is a game ender or any sort of critical error, it is something I think needs to be watched, and I would hate to see more and more cards of such extreme rarity and such universal utility continually be added. I am much more a fan of just ultra-rare versions of these cards, and for the most part, that is what it is. And while yes, there are competitive Flesh and Blood decks that can run in the thousands of dollars, the average Flesh and Blood deck will likely run you more in the couple $100 range, and that too is if we are talking competitively. I personally don't agree with Spring Tunic being used this way. I want, and will be lobbying for, all cards to have cheap versions of themselves, just as I have with Magic the Gathering, but just as I have with Magic the Gathering, the mere existence of fetch lands did not mean that Modern was a sham, a scam, unplayable, or any other thing. It meant they needed to be reprinted. Do you want to go to TC Vegas, play competitively, win the tournament by piloting your optimal deck with optimal skill? Then yeah, maybe in that situation you might be looking at picking up a Spring Tunic, a card you need 1 of and that never rotates, and maybe you're spending on your first Flesh and Blood deck the same you would on a modern Magic deck, or half of what you'd spend on a blinged out Commander deck. But the issue that comes up more and more is this worry that Flesh and Blood is just a fad, another game passing in the night, and, well, that's a question that's going to be raised of any newcomer to a scene that has games like Magic the Gathering, Pokemon TCG, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Existing in the quarter-century-long monolith position that they are in. But I'll tell you the truth about whether or not Flesh and Blood is just a fad. The Calling, those upcoming GP-like events being held in Cincinnati, Orlando, Dallas-Fort Worth, and Las Vegas, will be the ultimate test for Flesh and Blood, the proof to the world of this game's legitimacy, or the ultimate evidence for its doubters and naysayers. Here's why I think this is the moment, as it were, for Flesh and Blood. Legend Story Studios, maker of the game, again has gone all out on these events and on establishing, supporting, and promoting the Flesh and Blood competitive circuit and Pro Tour. Channel Fireball will be hosting these, and in addition to a main event with live coverage, feature matches, and huge prizes, there's a host of side events firing off all the time with everything from Blitz to draft and sealed and classic constructed events. Again, everything I've seen from Legend Story Studios has been a commitment to in-person gameplay, a commitment to establishing a strong player base. Heck, as I was writing this very script, boom, they shocked me by further dropping an announcement of their already supporting professional level play in 2022, which among other things includes $1 million in prize support. I'm not going to read through all the extensive details about their Pro Tour, World Championship Series, etc. There'll be a link to the details in this video's description if you want to read through it, but I think that Brian Gottlieb of Star City Games fame summed up the spirit of it when he said, Flesh and Blood using the Pro Tour branding for their biggest events that are basically just PTQ, GP, PT, WMC is an awesome nod in the direction of Magic built the best competitive circuit in gaming and abandoned it for no reason, so we'll just go ahead and pick that up. So look, there are 3 ways that these events will go. They will either be heavily attended, a huge main event rivaling that of former Magic GP main events, which obviously will be the final proof that the game has an audience, a player base, and a competitive circuit. Or the events will be a ghost town. Tiny main events with few players and the convention hall filled with more people jamming Magic the Gathering than Flesh and Blood. Well, that's it then. That's showing that the audience for this just isn't there yet, and maybe it'll never be. It'll certainly be very hard to argue otherwise if that is the result of these events. The other possibility about how these will go is that there's a decent but not overall impressive showing. There'll be a healthy but not astonishingly attended main event with possibly a lot of people drifting around looking for pickup games of Magic. What that demonstrates is more inconclusive, but leans more towards doubt than confidence in my eyes. As for me, I won't be playing Magic the Gathering at all at the Calling Vegas. I'll just be there playing Flesh and Blood, checking out the side events, vendor shops, and seeing casual events. As with Magic, I don't dream of glory in the main event, but also, as with Magic, there's a lot to do at these events even on the side. And from there, I'll be looking very closely at how populated that main event is. No game is perfect, but at the end of the day, Flesh and Blood is fun to play, unlimited packs for every single set are available at non-inflated prices, and the company seems to be investing heavily in supporting everything from in-person play, supporting local game stores, to supporting their own World Championship and Pro Tour, and also supporting these upcoming GP-like events. I'll be at the Calling Las Vegas, the world premiere pre-release of Flesh and Blood's newest set, and I'll take you... Damn it! Will Flesh and Blood be around in 2, 4, 5, 10, 15 years? I don't know the answer to that, though again, I think it is important to note that this game is no longer brand new. In a couple of months, they'll be hitting their 2-year anniversary, and being completely honest with everything I see, the game is only growing, only expanding, only exploding in popularity. Yes, there are some finance issues, though I feel strongly that the largest criticisms raised are hyperbolic or flat out untrue. No game is perfect, but at the end of the day, Flesh and Blood is fun to play, unlimited packs for every single set are available at non-inflated prices, and the company is investing heavily in supporting everything from in-person play to supporting local game stores to supporting their own World Championship and Pro Tour series to supporting these upcoming GP-like events. I'll be at the Calling Las Vegas, the world premiere pre-release of Flesh and Blood's newest set, and I'll tell you what I see there, though I wonder, will I see you there? Let's get some games.